Hey, what's good, guys? Mig here, and I'm going to show you how to make an old school hip hop beat, aka a boom bap beat, here on Logic Pro. And let's jump into this. So I've already laid some parts out here. I was working on this earlier. I'm going to just walk you through my mindset and how I found the sounds that I'm using, and let's just put this all together. So the first thing I did was I looked for something as a foundation. So I found this loop from Native Instruments Kontakt Sampler, and I ended up saying I like that, and I grabbed the audio from it and I dragged it in. So here's that loop. Sweet, I love that. I think it sounds soulful. That's just like what it should sound like for a 90s hip hop record. Should have that soulful R&B feel to it. So after I grabbed that loop, I said, let me come up with a bass line that will work for that loop. So I came up with something very simple, but it's exactly what it needs. Check this out. I got this double bass sound. It's actually a stock Logic Pro sound. This tutorial is not Logic Pro dependent. Everything I show you and teach you, you can do it in Ableton, Studio One, Pro Tools, wherever. FL Studio. So when we play the sample back with that, this is what it sounds like. So that is the basis for the music of this track. There is no other music in this track. Everything else is drum related and effect related. So let's go on from here and let's check out some of the other elements that I added to this. So first we have this snap. Very simple, but it sounds great with the drums, and you'll hear it all together and you'll see what I'm talking about. So this is a old school hip hop drum loop, which I filtered out the bottom and the top to give it more of a radio feel. So let's listen to that, okay? And before I filtered it out, it sounded like this. So not only did I make it a little bit different than the original loop, it actually fits really nicely with the drums that I'm going to show you next. So we have that loop, we have the snaps. Really nice. And for the snaps, I'm just going to throw on some reverb. All right, let's move on to the actual drums that I programmed. Now we'll start with this closed hat. So the way I played it initially was full volume, 16th notes, just and then I went here and I transformed the MIDI using a velocity randomizer. So in Logic, I just went over to the transform function, and I kept the velocities bouncing between 97 and 127. So the volume was like 9/10 of the way to 100%. So it was just kind of like bouncing here, and it gives it a little bit of a rhythmic feel. And then from there, we added in this kick and snare. And then I added Waves CLA2A compressor to the kick and the snare together. And that is my favorite compressor. That is my favorite compressor, at least one of them, for throwing on something and it's just instantly coming to life. So let me play that now. So now that we have that, I showed you the hats, the kick and snare, which I grouped together and then threw a CLA2A compressor on, took a little bit of the bottom off of the drum bus and added a little bit around 3K. And that's just to give it a little bit of snap. And now I'm going to show you this little vocal chop that I use as a fill between sections. So I found that vocal chop in Native Instruments Battery, one of the kits there, which I'm going to open up right now and show you. It's called Vocal G-Star. In the G-Star kit, which I believe is in the basement, what is it called? Basement Era Library, which is an expansion pack that you can use for machine, battery, and some of the Native Instruments plugins like Massive. And yeah, so I used that, put a delay on it from Native Instruments' Replica XT, which is a great delay unit. And I set it to dotted 1/8 notes. So now check that out and you'll hear how it ties the section together. Just a little something, you know what I'm saying? So, all right, let's go back to the beginning. So here's how I arrange this track. So you have an 8-bar intro. The first half of it doesn't have any drums. It has the bass line. It has a sample drum loop, but it doesn't have the kick and the snare. It has the hats. And then on the second half, I bring in the kick and the snare. Now this area is what I consider the verse, which does not have a bass and it doesn't have the 16th hi-hats. They come back in after the first 8 bars. The hi-hats come back in right here. So I bring those hi-hats in on the second 8 to now start building up the verse to get ready to go back to the hook. And when we get to the hook, I bring the bass line back, but I drop out the kick and the snare for the first 4, just like I did on the intro. Essentially, it's the intro, as the intro here was basically the hook, the first 8 bars. And then it's the hook again right here, and then we do exactly the same thing. Verse, second half of the verse, hook here again. For the third verse, or the bridge, we do half of what we did in the first and second verse. So the first and second verse would be here, this length right here, right? So let me do this so you don't get confused. 16 bars going from the beginning of the verse to the end of the verse going into the hook. So this is a verse. Okay? Then there's an 8-bar hook here. Then there's another 16-bar for the second verse. Then another 8-bar hook. But then the third verse, I only did that as an 8-bar and then we have another 8-bar hook, and then we have an actual 8-bar outro, which we're then going to fade. Now the outro is just a way to conclude the track, conclude the song, and include some of the instruments and fade them out. And you could do this faster if you want. So that's the end fading out. And okay, so why did I do only half the verse for the third verse? Simply, I got the track to about 3 minutes and 15 seconds with the outro fade, and I just figured it didn't need much more. We had 2 full verses here, and then the third one is really a bridge. So it's like just reiterating some of the concepts. The lyricist is going to reiterate some of the concepts from the first and second verse, and this is enough to get you from there right back into the hook and then out. That's the whole thing. If you got any value from this video, hit the like button, subscribe, and share the video. Peace out.